Good evening, everybody, and welcome to FaithBridge's weekly FaithBridge Focus. We're glad that you could join us here on our Facebook Live. FaithBridge is committed to ensuring that 100% of kids go to a high-quality school, whether they graduate ready for the choice of college without remediation. And there's so many factors that go into that, and none more important than health, right? You got to have total health and total wellness. And so today we're going to be talking about healthcare, open enrollment, and talking with a brilliant man who is one of the top CEOs. I was reading up on him, and he's been touted as one of the top CEOs in the country, just one of the top people to work for, to work with, and we're glad that we have him here. You know, as we move through, one of the things that we learned about 2020 is the importance of planning ahead. We've learned that while we can't predict when a crisis will happen, what we've learned is that crises they do happen, and so it's to be prepared is a great thing. And now more than ever, health insurance is critical, and we know that there's a lot of things that happen that have made it more accessible to more people. And so today that's what we're going to talk about. That's what our guest is going to be here to share with us. Our guest is the Chief Executive Officer of Connect for Health Colorado. He's well known in our community, having served in so many different capacities, and he's just a great guy overall. So I want to welcome him, Mr. Kevin Patterson. Kevin, how you doing, man?
Vernon, it's good to see you. How you been?
Good, man. Good. So good to have you here in your role. I think this is the first time I sit down and talk with you in your new role as CEO of the Colorado Connect for Health. Tell us a little bit about that. What you're doing in that role. What does it mean to be the CEO of that space? And then we'll get into all the nuts and bolts of healthcare talk.
Wow, that's a lot in that first question, but I'm really a privilege and pleasure to be with you. I really admire what you all are doing. So I just wanted to give you a shout out because I think what you are doing is right spot on. But for Connect for Health, we are the state-based marketplace. So basically we're Obamacare for the state of Colorado. There are a baker's dozen, well, actually there's 15 now, states that run their own marketplaces like Colorado. The rest of the states go to healthcare.gov, and the federal government runs their Obamacare, their open enrollment every year. And so this came out of a bipartisan approach from a legislature where the House was run by Republicans, the Senate was run by Democrats at the time. In 2011, I was still with Governor Hickenlooper. The compromise was to have an organization that was a nonprofit, separate and apart from state government, but with state government oversight. And so we have an oversight committee. We have the federal government that we report to. We have state audits that we're a part of. And so there's a great deal of transparency for the federal dollars that come through our organization. And what we do is basically help people figure out how to get the discount that Obamacare really gives you for buying health insurance. And so for last year, just to give you an example, people were buying on average about $500 per month premiums of health insurance. What they paid with after the tax credit, because what we do is give you a tax credit in advance, so it lowers the monthly premium, it ended up being around $135, $140. And so it's a pretty significant savings for folks that are working and trying to figure out how they're going to pull their health care together, because a lot of jobs, they might pay a couple $100 here or there, or they might not have any health care where they work. And so our program really is for folks that don't have employer-sponsored insurance, which is basically you get it as a benefit at work, that you come to us at the individual market and we help figure it out. So we have a call center, we work with brokers, we have folks that are in community-based organizations and assistance network that are spread all over the state of Colorado, where you can walk in, or virtually now with COVID, you can go in and talk to somebody and kind of walk through your particular family situation so you can get the plan that works for you in your location and hopefully understand exactly what it is that you're buying. So we're really about access, affordability, and choice. And so we try to make sure folks have all three of those things, because those are the three legs of the stool that's in our legislation that set us up.
Yeah, most definitely. So access, affordability, choice. And how many folks are taking advantage of?
So we have a little over 150 2,000 folks. That number changes a little bit every day, which is a good number. I want to have more, because if the more people we help, the more people we can make sure they get that good health care early and have that access. Last year we did, because we can do this as a state, we did our own special enrollment period. And so right when COVID was really spiking in the March timeframe, we were working with the governor's office, working with healthcare policy and financing, public health, all the state agencies. And they said, hey, Kevin, I think you guys are going to need to do a special enrollment. We want to make sure folks have access to healthcare before we get to this place where we're going to get nervous about hospitalizations. Right. And so we did, and we opened it up again in the middle of the year, which we can do at our state level. And the feds did not decide to do that. And so when we did that, I thought we'd get a few thousand people that came through. We got over 14,000 folks signed up in 6 weeks. With no warning. And I was just floored by that. But I was also really happy, because I was like, okay, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to give access to that number of people that are like, look, I better go ahead and get this insurance, because I don't know what's going on with this coronavirus. And I want to make sure I don't get caught with a big hefty bill after I go through all this process. And so we just wanted to make sure folks had that peace of mind. That's really what we're trying to give people.
So how have you navigated the politics? I mean, when you this is coming. I mean, the politics of the current occupant of the White House, who shall not be named on my show, but who may not leave, right? And one of the things he was going after was the Affordable Care Act. I mean, what you do in jeopardy? How was it going to be in jeopardy? And I know that's a mouthful.
But there's so much to say there, Vernon, because I'm going to be honest with you. We had this last, what was it, the 10th? So not quite a week ago, the Supreme Court was discussing the Affordable Care Act for the third time since its inception. So it's not often that you have a Supreme Court case directly impacting what you do, but to have it happen multiple times, you kind of get used to it. And so, I mean, I was in DC when the House voted down the Affordable Care Act. I actually just happened to be there visiting with some of my other colleagues and the federal government representatives that we deal with. So someone came back from the Rose Garden, and they were just happy about what had happened. And we're all looking at each other like, do you remember what we do? There's a room full of folks implementing this federal law. So we were all kind of dumbfounded by that. But I think as I was talking to my staff before this, they were like, Kevin, what are we going to do? And I actually had the same conversation with my board. I said, look, we've done a really good job swimming upstream, working against a current. And depending on how this election goes, we might have to swim with the current. You don't have total control that way either. So for us, it's really about the fact that we're adaptable and we know our state so well. People really do trust us when we talk to either other states or other folks in the federal government. They're asking us what things that we would want to consider for the future of the Affordable Care Act. And so, we're really talking about, let us do what we know best, which is serve our clients. We know what our folks need. And so helping us get to more people is all I'm really asking them to do. So half the time I'm actually telling them to get out of the way so that we can do the things that make sense in Colorado. I think, what's interesting in Colorado is, when I go back east, it's really hard for them to understand, one, how large we are as a state and how spread out we are and how important these watersheds are, because people in Colorado live within these watersheds between, the two large rows of peaks. So whether you're going across Wolf Creek Pass or Levita Pass or, people live within those worlds in Colorado, and trying to get access to care when you're 7 hours away from Denver, and that's the specialist you need, is something people talk about a lot here. And so we have to help people understand what we're dealing with, and they don't get it because you can drive 2 hours and you've gone through 5 states. Here, I'm just going up and down the Front Range.
Right. So Kevin, where's your best penetration as far as folks signing up for the program, and then where are you most concerned about folks not tapping into the program?
What's ironic is I think we do a really good job in parts of rural Colorado. And I can tell you that in Dolores County, which you probably don't even know where that is, but it's a spitting distance from Utah, we get a large percentage of their county population that's eligible for the exchange on the exchange, because I've got a great assister out there. And so, it's not as much noise to cut through, but when you come on the Front Range, there's so many choices. There's so many different things going. Trying to get penetration into communities along the Front Range is sometimes harder than in areas that might not vote the way you and I are thinking about. And so what's really interesting to me is how some of these smaller rural communities actually get around that sense of community and trying to take care of their neighbors because they see these folks all the time. And I think along the Front Range, because there's so many of us and so many new people, we don't have the same connection with each other. And so it becomes a policy statement versus, no, I need to do this for Vernon because I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks. So I need to make sure I've got the answer to this question. And so it's just a different way that they kind of approach it. And so I'm looking at what they're doing in Mesa County and Montrose, down in Tri-County, down in San Miguel, around Telluride, down to Cortez. I'm going all through the San Luis Valley. I'm looking at what they're doing in Fort Collins. They've got a really cool approach with a great nonprofit partner we work with up there in Larimer County. And so I'm actually trying to take a lot of those things that we're learning that work on the ground because they have to, because they don't have as many resources in a lot of these places, and trying to make sure that we can really find ways to have them work in the Front Range.
Yeah. So Kevin, how did you end up in this spot? Right. I know I was a little boy, you had the dream, you wanted to play in the NBA, and no.
So yeah, I thought I was going to be a high school principal. That's what I thought I was going to do.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, that's what I went to school for. And so to be in this job that literally did not exist a little over 10 years ago is kind of a little mind blowing in some days. But I got here. I was on the board of the exchange in the governor's office because I was working with healthcare policy and financing and working with CVMS and a lot of the things that the counties were dealing with. And so they said, well, you'd be good to kind of go help and make sure we get this Obamacare thing off the ground. And so they said, okay, I'll go over there after the guy from Economic Development, Ken Lund, went somewhere else. And so they needed somebody else to go on the board. So I did that for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then I became chief of staff when Roxanne left. We went through the re-elect and all that fun stuff. So I go in and I figured I was going to be with the governor for the next 4 years, help pick a new chief of staff. That new chief of staff came to me and says, well, Kevin, they need somebody over there at the exchange. They don't have an executive director. I said, yeah, I do know that. I was on their board. I know exactly what's going on. So I made a deal with the governor. I'm staying right here. He said, okay. So this person comes in, they go and meet with the legislature up on the second floor, governor's office, as you know, on the first floor. It went so badly. My phone was just blowing up. People are like, Kevin, this is not going well. What happened? The person was supposed to come down, meet with the governor, meet with us, kind of talk through what we were seeing, and bolted, left the Capitol, didn't meet with anybody, went home. So my new chief of staff friend came back to me and said, Kevin, they still need an executive director over at the exchange. And I said, look, if you talk to the board chair, if the board chair thinks I can be helpful, I'll go over there. So they came and they said, okay, let's see how this works. And that was a little over 5 years ago now.
Wow. So Kevin, you have a lot of experience. Some of that experience is you served on the school board.
I did.
In Denver Public Schools.
8 wonderful years.
8 wonderful years. That's back in the day when life was simpler. I
don't know about that.
Yeah, I can remember some doozies meetings that we had at 900 Grant.
Mm-hmm.
I do still say that you guys, that board you sat on, had the best food in the little breakout room right there. So I'd love staying at those meetings. But so a lot going on in education, man. Healthcare, education, all about people's total wellness. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about things? I'll go generally to you.
So I'll start generally. If you want to go specific, that's fine.
We'll get specific, yeah.
I know you will. I was talking to somebody back in DC today, and they have kids in the district. They're talking about what's going on with the coronavirus, kids are in school, they're out, what's going on with online learning, how difficult it is. I've seen my niece and my goddaughters, just struggling because it is hard, especially if they're younger. And so I'm talking to her and she's like, yeah. And I said, yeah, I spent 8 years on the school board. I'm actually glad I'm in healthcare right now because as hard as healthcare is, education is still harder. I really feel it is more difficult because a lot of the issues are so socially ingrained. The same way we've been talking about these issues as part of systemic racism is still a part of that. I think you've got the poverty issue that is another part of it. You've got the culture, you've got the language, you've got this geography, you've got the fact that everybody wants to compare Denver high schools to suburban high schools. And I said, they build suburban high schools for 2,000 to 3,000 kids. We're not doing that in Denver. You can't compare apples and oranges and wonder why they taste different. It's just a different approach. And so I think until you actually want to take a different approach in Denver, you're going to have the same kinds of problems because everybody talks about how many, we've got too many people in 900 Grant or whatever the address is now, Emily Griffith. And the problem is when you have, I'll just pick on Cherry Creek High School because it came to my mind first. They've got one principal for, 2,000, 2,500 kids, whatever their number is. So you've got pick a high school besides East. They're not anywhere near that number. And so your administrative cost is always going to be higher. So how do you do that? And then how do you do it with elementary schools that are 250, 300 kids? And so it's hard to be that spread out as an institution and then complain about your costs because it's like, well, yeah, but you're spread out. You have to consolidate if you want to do something different about that. And I think that's the challenge of trying to figure out how do we make tougher decisions around how the structure works? Because I don't know that it's necessarily about curriculum. I think it's about management. And if you've got good management, it's fine. But if you need more high school principals, it's harder to get superstars because it's just the pool's not that deep.
Right, man.
Everybody can't be the best at everything. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Man, we all get participation trophies though.
Yeah, I mean, But when you go get a job, they're not asking for a participation trophy.
No,
they're asking you to talk about the skill. You got to show skills.
So Kevin, as you're saying that, as you know, we are having a management change in Denver public schools. Yeah, I mean,
I did not see that coming, so I don't know what to think about it.
Right, and so I think there's you were on the board. Was it when Tom first started during the Michael Tom transition?
I was there for both of those transitions, from Jerry to Michael.
Oh, that's right.
And from Michael to Tom.
What do you remember about those things? Which one wasn't more smooth? Now Tom was the COO under Michael, so that was, and Michael was not anywhere near DPS.
No, he was chief of staff with Hickenlooper. I knew that. So I think that one was the tougher one because it was, okay, why are you picking this guy? Because he doesn't come from education. He's not a school principal. He's not been an assistant superintendent, the normal path that people look for. And I thought that actually was the best reason to pick Michael's because you needed somebody that was going to do something different because what we were doing was not working.
Right.
And so I don't understand why we continue to drive down a road we know is not getting us to our destination. We feel like we can't turn left, right, 180 degrees. We're going to keep going this direction.
Right.
And I don't know until we fall off the cliff. I mean, I don't get that. And we made a change and I thought we saw some movement until Michael left. And I think it got tougher after that.
Yeah, I agree. Then you had the transition. Tom came in. Tom was always the behind the scene guy, numbers guy. He was that's who he was. That came from level 3 communications, came to the district to be CEO. I know my history, right? I've been around too long, right? Yeah, well, and so Tom comes in and Tom begins to do what he does. And I agree with what you said. Things got harder. I mean, Michael introduced some things and they were controversial. But I also think, to your point, you can't keep going down the same path expecting a different result. And so there was some urgency under Bennett to say, guys, look, if you want a different result, you have to do differently. And I think that's still been the battle that we're still dealing with even today is,
no, I agree.
Yeah. Do people really want differently? And then how flexible? I mean, the health exchange, like you said, the health exchange, 5 years, you've been doing it. It didn't exist 10 years ago, right? It's a new way to get people access, like you said, to get them access, to get them at the cost effectiveness of it, to make sure that people can look at you and say, man, that's not how we do healthcare. That's not the process for signing up,
Well, it's funny you say that, because I will argue with my colleagues on any number of things to say, that might sound good to you, but that's not going to work for me. So you guys can do it that way you want, or I might be the contrarian on a particular issue and say, yeah, that doesn't work for us here. And I can't go along with that. So I think the parallels are actually quite striking when I, just sitting here thinking about it, because when you look at Denver, the city and county of Denver, and how wide and spread out it is compared to other school districts, the thing that I think really worked well was the area superintendents and actually allowing the communities to help drive more of what happened in the times from Wortgo through Bennett. I think that actually did a better job. You had a quicker response time. You had people engaged in the community in a lot more effective way because they were literally housed in the community. There were a lot more partnerships. I think it was going in the right direction. And I think when we started pulling back and saying, well, we got too much at 900 grant, the irony is most of that really wasn't at 900 grant. It actually was out in the community. And so they were allowed, I think, especially in Northeast, to do things that looked different for Southeast, Southwest, Northwest, because those communities look very different than each other. And so the irony actually is that the model I actually use at the exchange here is to say, we're going to do what works for Colorado. We understand I'm not saying I'm not going to ignoring federal requirements, but I'm going to find a way to be compliant, but in a way that's compliant for my community and my citizens. And so I think the district for that time really was trying to get to that point and say, look, we know we've got to get better results, but the way we need to do it in Northeast Denver needs to look different than it does in other parts of the city. And I don't know why anybody thinks that that's a challenging or would challenge that kind of statement. It doesn't mean it looks different. And now, good Lord, I mean, that whole part of town when I was there, we would have been the 6th largest school district in the state. I bet it's larger than that now. And so you can't sit there and try to hamstring that part of town to say, well, you got to do it the way that we're trying to do it. It's like, no, we're different than you all. And I think that needs to be part of the conversation.
Most definitely. And I think what you said even about health exchange is that when we look at a community, we understand that people are dealing with different factors, different challenges. And so I can't address your healthcare need the same way I address the healthcare need over there, because they don't have the same struggle.
Yeah.
If you come in and you're presenting with the flu and I treat you for the common cold and send you home, I might not see you back.
Well, I think that is the issue. You can't sit here. I would say this then it was still CSAP scores saying it's one bit of information. It's not everything. And so if we're going to treat it like you got a fever, well, what does that mean? The doctor doesn't say, well, you got a fever. I know what's wrong with you. It's like, okay, something's wrong with you. You got a fever. We got to figure out where it's coming from. We don't necessarily in education go those extra steps and try to figure out what problem the student is presented with. So we actually can say, oh, here's what we need to do for this particular student, which might be different than this other student in the row right next to him in the same classroom. So that's the challenge I think we have to figure out, is how do you actually diagnose and treat educational deficiencies the same way that we're trying to talk about them in the healthcare space. I don't know. That's just me.
That's, man, we sound like we're thinking too much, right? I mean, but this is, I mean, the best professional development I ever did was taking a staff to Children's Hospital and having them watch the processes of Children's Hospital and then applying those same processes to how we serve students and how we serve families, right? The same level of care, the same principle, the same process of diagnosing, the same process of saying, here are the different options that are available to treat that, right?
Makes sense to me.
It makes sense. It's like sometimes people make it more complicated, and maybe it's not complicated. Maybe they make it more political.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But
maybe.
Again, if you're not getting the results that you think you need for the student, I mean, I think sometimes we talk about the outcomes for everybody else but the student.
Right.
But you got to talk about what's going on with that student, because if you make that student stronger, you're making the whole community stronger. And we're just forgetting, I think, that basic piece of what we're supposed to be doing in that space. But I'll get off my soapbox.
No, but and so now let me bring this back around circle to the exchange. What is eligibility to be a part of the exchange?
So what I think people really don't appreciate is how much you actually can make and still qualify for the exchange. So if you're you're on your own, you're working and you've got a job making $15, $16, $17 an hour, you're in my space, because you can make up to a little over $48,000 a year and still qualify. And if you're a family of four, it's a little over $100,000 that you can make and still qualify. Now, if you're closer to the bottom edge of that, you not only do you get help with the tax credit, but you'll get what they call as the cost share reduction, which means they help pay for out-of-pocket costs. So if you get a prescription or your copay, sometimes you can get that paid for as well. And so there's some folks, when they shop, you can buy bronze, they're metal level tiers, bronze, silver, and gold. You can get there's some bronze plans in some parts of the state where you actually have a $0 premium. So you just have to make sure that you're shopping smart, understanding how you're going to use it. So if you're like, I'm pretty healthy, I just want to make sure I go in and get my normal regular checks, you might not need to shop all the way up for gold, because you don't have some sort of specific condition that you have to go to the doctor a lot, or you've got this long list of prescriptions that you've got to manage. So you just really should talk to a broker or somebody that's an assistant to kind of understand what your choices are. But if it gets really complicated, we really do suggest that they talk to a broker, because there's just so many options that they can do, because the broker actually doesn't cost you anything.
Right. Man, that's great. I got so many parallels as you're talking about the exchange. My head is just spinning about, God, those same type of things being applied to education.
Yeah.
There are some solutions right there, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at success in other industries and other fields. Say, hey, we can apply that, right? So, Guy Hickenlooper is going to be is the senator-elect.
Yeah, I have to tell you, it's funny. Somebody was asking me, they said, hey, are you going with him? And I'm like, oh, no. I go to DC quarterly if I have to. I love Colorado. I'm staying right here. I'm not planning to go anywhere. So, but I'm happy to be supportive. You know, I've had a chance to send a message even to Corey Gardner, who was always very gracious when I talked to him. You know, but it'll be interesting. I mean, he now has to be the junior senator to somebody that's my age. So it'll be right. It's kind of funny. It's a different world. I'm sure he'll adjust just fine. But it should be fun. It should be fun. There's going to be they got a lot to do.
Most definitely. You know, and so let me ask you this too. So you and your family, both of you and your wife have been involved in education world for a while, and you're in healthcare industry. I want to talk about people of color, Black people in the healthcare industry. Are there a lot of us? If there are, how did that happen? If there aren't, what are those efforts? And I want you to parallel it with your experiences under Wartga, Bennett, and Boasberg, and our effectiveness to bring in Black leadership and Black teachers.
Man, okay, that's a big one. So I still think that there are not enough because you've got to have somebody that understands where folks are coming from, and sometimes knowing that they've had the similar path that you've had, they just kind of get that piece. So I think we're doing a better job. We actually do a pretty good job in Colorado, considering we're 4% of the
Yeah.
population of it for African Americans around the state. And you've got me at the exchange, Karen McNeil Miller over at the Colorado Health Foundation. So I think that's really significant. But I think you also can't ignore the fact that we've got Black leadership in the legislature. You've got Deidre at Center for African American Health. I think it's not just about having Black leadership at these larger organizations. It's about developing Black leadership from the community on up, because you've got to have folks on. You got to have the air campaign and the ground campaign. It works no matter what level you're talking about. You know, that somebody's got to kind of talk across the airwaves like I can do, but somebody's got to be in the community also doing that work, that regular folks that are just going around and they see somebody and they're like, all right, Vernon, is that guy really what he says he is? Or you know, that just has to be part of that conversation. The other part of that, though, is actually beginning to bring up especially young leaders so they can begin to learn these jobs and learn how they can bring their energy and ideas to the conversation in ways that we can actually bring them to the table earlier on, so they can actually learn how to be impactful for a longer period of time. So those are the things I think that are really important for us to think about, which is why I'm so impressed by what you all are doing. And I think we've got to begin to think about this equity issue, not just about in social determinants of health, you know, for health equity, but also how do we actually grow Black leadership, no matter what the industry or particular sphere is. We have to grow it everywhere. And so anytime somebody will call me and ask for advice, I try to call them back as quick as I can. Sometimes it takes me a minute, but I will give them as much time as I can, because I know how hard it is to move up through these worlds. And the more people we have coming up, the more we actually will be able to do, because more hands makes light work. Yeah.
Now, how do you feel like we attract more Black leaders, Black teachers in education? I mean, you know, we both love Colorado. What is the narrative that we're not sharing that would attract Black professionals in education to our school district?
So I think there's two questions. One is, how do you get them in education? And then how do you get them in education here? Because I think those are two different questions.
Agreed.
I think the general problem with getting educated Black folks in education is because the jobs that they have or other options they have outside of education just pay better. Yeah. And, you know, I've talked to, you know, my kids' age, you know, because they're, you know, early 30s, late 20s. You know, they come out of school, they're working at very large corporations. They've either got engineering degrees or any kind of science. They're like, well, why would I be a science teacher and make $30-some thousand when Boeing's going to pay me this much, or ULA is going to pay me this much, or I can take my computer degree and go work over here and make all this. I mean, it's a difficult conversation to have to somebody, because it's not a little bit more that they can make. It's multiples.
Double, triple,
double and triple.
The wealth gap is real. I mean, we talk about that too. We talk about health disparity, but we also talk about the wealth gap. And so,
and if they're trying to
manage
meet
both
that,
of those,
I think that's a challenge. Is how do you say no to them making the wealth gap better for them and their family? I get that. Oh no, you shouldn't take all that money and go teach at a school. I'm like, I don't know how you can look at them and say, I mean, I get the impassioned approach to doing that. And if that's where they are and that's their calling, that's great. But math is math. I mean, and if they're good at it, they're going to figure out, well, wait a minute. So I think that is a huge challenge. Getting people to come to Colorado is actually not as hard.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, wherever I go, people are telling me what's going on in Colorado. Black, white, yellow, green, blue. I mean, it doesn't matter. Yeah. I can go from coast to coast and people will tell me what we're doing. I have gone into a national organization in DC. They say, wait, Kevin, before you start talking, let me bring my Colorado person that's watching your legislation. And this person, young African-American lady, came in and starts running down bits of legislation that were going on at the same time. And I'm like, okay, there's something. So they're really, the nation is watching us very closely. Yeah. So I actually think you can get people to come to Colorado. You're seeing companies making that pitch. They're coming from both coasts here. and I don't think that's going to slow down. I hate to tell you people that,
Yeah.
but I do think that that's going to help. Getting folks in education, I think, is just a different question, because with Tabor, it's really hard to pay professional kinds of pay. So I just don't know how you get around that particular knot. That's where I think the challenge really is.
Yeah. So you wanted to be a high school principal. Who inspired you to want to do that?
So my grandparents were both educators in Texas. My grandfather was a high school principal on the south side of Dallas. At the height of gang violence, and the murder rate was it was top two or three. And when I was going into education back then, my grandmother was a special education teacher, taught music. My mother was a paraprofessional before she went into being a nurse. So it was kind of what the family did back there in Texas. And so, I went to a school that was a teacher's school, Sam Houston State University, go Bearcats. And I tell you, it was one of the best educations I could have gotten, because very small classes, great teacher oversight, just a really, really quality education. I mean, I lived in the library the last year and a half, because they have you writing and doing all this stuff to kind of get you ready for what you need to do. So I thought I was really prepared. And next thing you know, I'm up here in Denver. They told me I had to take all of my schooling all over again. And I said, no, I don't. So I went and got a master's degree in public administration. And that kind of launched me into this policy world that I've been in the last forever.
Well, we're looking for a superintendent.
That's funny. I'll send some folks your way.
I'll go through some good candidates.
Yeah, I got some good names for you.
Get some good names. Good.
That's funny.
I was just seeing, man. See if you wanted something fresh, something new.
No, my cup runneth over, as folks with faith will say.
Right. So our executive director of FaithBridge is Representative James Coleman. He's senator-elect. Getting ready to be a senator in January. What advice do you have, young black man serving? He just served in the House, getting ready to serve in the Senate. Knowing the political landscape, what's something you would say to him and to other newly elected folks? I mean, Jennifer Bacon, who serves on our school board, is about to be our state rep. What do you say to them? You've navigated a lot of the spaces that they're going to have to step into now.
Speak your truth. I tell you, as difficult as some of the decisions were that I made on the school board, my rule was, if I can look in the mirror and be okay, that's all I can deal with. All this other shenanigans and the stuff that happens outside of that, you can't get distracted from what are the things that you've seen, stories that you've heard from folks. How do you get their story in every room that you're in? Because your responsibility is to carry that story everywhere you go. And I think of that all the time, of just going in, whether I'm in the White House, that I haven't been in the last 4 years, the EOB, any of the federal agencies that I go in, I'm telling the story, where I've come from, the folks that I represent, the people that have told me stories all along the journey. I was in DMV earlier today trying to move some paperwork around that somebody lost somewhere, but wasn't me. And the lady looks at me and she says, I know you. And she's like, I worked in the web building. And so we're telling the story now. It's like, yep, I was in the web building. We were one of the first ones to move in. And so you always having that connection to these folks that you represent and these people that you speak for. Just do that. If you do that, you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. Well, look, we go about 45 minutes. We're almost done. And I just wanted to say thank you for, spending time to talk about the Connect for Health Colorado. Linda Gran put the link in our chat for us. So folks who are watching online, you can click that link to get the information that Kevin talks about. Man, I want to shout you out because most people don't know you were recognized by the Denver Journal. Most admired CEO because of your strong visionary leadership and how you're guiding your company, especially during these unprecedented times of COVID. So, we believe in giving flowers while folks can still smell them. So just wanted to say, man, we appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much, Vernon.
That's Black excellence, man. You've been Black excellence as long as I've known you, though. So I really appreciate that, man.
No, I'm just trying to do what they put me in charge of, just trying to make sure I'm doing my best.
And I want to say thank you to on the school board when you were there. You, again, a person of integrity. I mean, your word was your word. And I can remember some tough calls that had to be made. And, I do remember some long meetings,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you stood by it and you represented us well, man. So I really appreciate that. Really appreciate
Thank
that.
you so much. That means a lot coming from you.
Yeah, man. Anything that you want to throw at us before we get out of here?
Just making sure folks know that we're in open enrollment. It started on November 1st. It goes through January 15th. Call us 1-855-PLANS, the number 4 YOU. You can call us. We've got a connection on our email. If you've got we can help you find help on our website. So if you get to our website, connect forhealthco.com. Make sure that and it just gives you many places to start. If you're a small business, we've got a page for you to start. And I mean small, meaning it might just be you. That's
right.
Fine. We're here to help you just as we are to help somebody that has 75, 100 employees. We don't care. We're trying to get everybody that we can get insurance because we just don't want you to get caught unaware. We don't want you to get into a situation where you're looking at medical bankruptcy. We want to make sure you get the care you need when you need it, because you only get one body. You can trade in a car. You can't trade in your body. So you've got to take care of it. And I want to make sure people have the resources to do that the best way they can.
Excellent, man. Thank you for being with us. Give my best to my sister, to the doctor.
I will do that. I will do that.
Tell her we said hello. I tell her she and I need to get together to talk about some social emotional learning stuff that I want to work on.
That's her thing. Don't get me talking about that. I'm not.
Yeah, in our innovation zone, we'd love to talk to her about that.
Yeah, she'd be great to do that.
Okay, all right, man. Best to you and the family, man. Talk to you soon.
You best to you and yours.
Okay, you guys. That was Kevin Patterson, man, CEO, award-winning CEO of the Connect for Health Colorado. Doing great things for our community, doing great things with our community, and so we want to shout him out. Thank him for joining us here on the FaithBridge Focus this Monday. If you're a leader in our community and you want to connect with us and you want to get your message out to the community, reach out. You can message us here on Facebook, and we definitely will share the platform with you to make sure that the best information is getting out to our community via our Facebook Live and via our Faith Network. We thank you so much for being with us tonight. We do want to remind folks that the Board of Education is currently of Denver is meeting in a work session. We have that as well. So we're going to put that up and allow, as we did a couple of weeks ago, stream that. So those of you who would want to hear what's going on there, as we do, as I'm watching it here, we want to put that up as well so you can see that. So you can stay involved. As Kevin and I were talking about just the transitions, you heard about the transitions that he talked about, serving through Work God to Bennett and from Bennett to Boasberg, and talked about the different challenges that came with those transitions. Also talked about the change in direction that we needed to go, and understanding that you have to look at the outcomes for students. This is just like he was talking about health outcomes, that we have to get to the point where what this is about is genuinely students, right? And students being ready when they matriculate grade to grade, when they matriculate from elementary to middle school, when they matriculate from middle school to high school, and then when they go to high school to college or career. Those are very important things that we need to be focused on. So appreciate Kevin saying that, and appreciate the wisdom that he shared for all of us to speak our truth in the spaces that we're in, and to be focused on where we go. Also, to take some time. Look, we like to support our young people who are doing great things. So I gotta shout out to Elijah Huff. Let me see if I can get that in the shot there. Got the hoodie on today for the East First brand. Elijah Huff, a Denver Public School graduate, Manual High School graduate, who's come back and is serving his community and has got the brand out. Let me give you that look again. He's got the brand going on, and so we are we're supporting him, and the branding is going on, so you can see what's happening. You can get those from Huff and support somebody who's in our community doing great things. But thank Elijah Huff for what you're doing. He reminds me of a young Kevin Patterson who's very focused, very committed to his community. So again, make sure you for the Colorado Health Exchange that you look at that window from November 1st to January 15th, 2021. Get on their website. Information is there, and as Kevin said, we want to make sure folks have coverage. They have access, and they have access to quality care. So here we go. Let me get the school board meeting up for some of you guys who are with me, and I'm going to check that out.
What are options for parents? And this has come up several times from constituents. Is what are options for parents to say, actually, I want my kid to repeat this year because they did not get the full year of education, and I want them to able to do it again. So that's a two-parter. One, continuity education, and two, can parents request a repeat of this year for students that would like it?
Yeah, let me take a stab really quickly at something that I think we have put a lot of energy into. We did apply for the RISE grant, and unfortunately in the first round we're not funded. We are going to apply again in the second round that will become available in December. Really specifically with the focus exactly on what you're talking about, which is how do we give our students, particularly our students who have been most heavily impacted by the pandemic with unfinished learning, an opportunity for what we are calling like a third semester with highly motivational learning experiences to accelerate unfinished learning. And help our students get ahead. I would definitely recommend that if there is additional stimulus funding that comes into our schools, that we very much target it at extending what the school year can look like, and would really encourage us to think about what those extensions can be, so that it's not necessarily like the typical kind of summer programming that focuses on summer school remediation, but really is highly motivational for students to get them engaged and learning to help develop many of the competencies that they may be missing right now. Tamara, do you want to talk a little bit about continuity?
Absolutely. And so Director Anderson, I really appreciate the question, because I think it is important. We've learned a lot from moving directly into remote learning in the spring, and we made a lot of improvements to remote learning as a result of what we've learned. Those improvements don't stop from that spring. They've continued. So, in some of the data that we've shared previously and data that's within and housed within the stack, we continue to monitor that in terms of survey data from what we're learning from students, what we're learning from teachers, and what we're learning from leaders. And then what we've been working on is to develop, now that we've had some time in remote learning and some learnings now from in-person, given our new in-person reality, how are we identifying that the teachers that are thriving in those environments, so we can use what they're learning to provide support and professional learning to teachers, and to adjust the plan from there. So I would say for second semester, like what we'll see is adjustments to our professional learning and strategy that take into account what we're learning from our teachers that are having great success. And any adjustments that we need to make in terms of the remote environment and our learning management systems, that is what we'll see to continue to ensure that we're having equitable experiences across the remote environment. And then in terms of the in-person learning, the same thing's true, but then also improving upon how and the experience that we're able to provide, given what we're learning about cohorting, and changes that we can potentially make there, connected to a student's schedule, particularly at different levels, elementary, middle, and high school. So more to come there. I think it's ongoing work. You're right, it's not going to change, and it is our focus.
And real quick, just one other follow-up question. Have we put on the table, and I know that Jen raised this, our Director Vice President Bacon raised this the last meeting, but I really want us to put it back on the forefront and think about what we can do. Have we really thought about adjusting our calendar to adhere to an all-year school year calendar? I know folks may not 100% agree, and they may love their summers and their spring breaks, etc. But I think this is a pivotal time for us to really rethink education. And I know Director Bacon raised this last meeting. I'm not sure if we have any progress around that or if we thought about that, but have we put on the table from any department about what it would take for our school district to go all year round?
Yeah, that's actually what I was referencing when I talked about a third semester. To be able to have an extended school year, we would obviously need a significant infusion of additional funds to be able to have our teachers continue to work throughout the summer.
Thank you.
And I know Vice President Bacon also had a question. Vice President Bacon?
Yes, thank you. Just generally for a little bit of commentary for the policy wonks that are watching. It's been a really incredible advantage to be able to quarter out our work and to monitor progress. I do think it has been a step in a positive direction for us as a district to not only name our priorities, but to check in on how we're doing with them. And that being said, I'm wondering if there are just a few top level things that you can address, as senior staff on this particular crisis priority. Maybe we might have an opportunity to reframe, or not reframe, to phrase what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Part of, building off of what Director Anderson just shared, part of the reason we talked about is year-round school on the table. It just means as we are monitoring our progress, what is it that we understand about this year, and what are the trigger points to make decisions about where we are with learning? And the other piece is, what is the theme of the learning that we are trying to be sure students accomplish? This kind of came up, at the end of last school year when we were talking about grading systems, right? We're saying, in this school year where we know we are facing these incredible odds, what are we focusing on? We focus on mastery of concepts or A through Fs, And so that question is for you, as we're monitoring this progress, what are the lines and triggers where you feel like we might have to make some dramatic differences or put some real things on the table? And again, if you can probably just, phrase what it is that we're trying to accomplish with this year of learning. And then I think the other piece, I'm just going to put both questions out there, is throughout the 3 crisis priorities, the thing that I've seen in your metrics of measuring, I just want to reframe for people, we've named goals, and the senior leadership team work to create strategies, and they are tracking the progress of the execution of the strategies and also the progress of meeting the goals. That's what we're seeing today. And so if you have, for every crisis priority, we see like that, the team is yellow around capacity. Also wondering what that means for you all as a team as we think about the next 2 quarters and what it is that we might need to adjust or understand to pursue our progress. So were you able to kind of hear the 2 sides of questions?
I think I was, Vice President Bacon, but I'll answer it, and then you let me know if I missed something, okay? Or if there's something that we need to come back to. I think, what are we hoping to accomplish within this crisis priority by the end of the year and into next year? I think with that, what we've listed as the 3 strategies, there are 2 main things. One is the strategies, and that we're hitting implementation benchmarks to make sure we're delivering on supporting those strategies as a district. That's at a central level, that's at a division level, and then that's at a school level. So those processes and systems in place. The second thing is connected to the metrics and the goals, which are the outcome measures that are attached, that we're continuing to monitor. We've had conversations on that. This is such a different year that, and quite frankly, you know, it's been a struggle to determine like what is the most accurate student academic outcome measure that we can look at. So I think that's ongoing that we have to continue to evaluate and look at. For instance, our literacy data, our READ Act data. It's the first time that we've implemented that assessment as a system remotely. So right now we're going through the process of looking at what outliers do we have in the data, where we know the data is just too high, or conversely, the data is just too low. So, but that is an area that we are monitoring. I think the other connected to those outcome data measurements are it's ongoing that we were monitoring before. That's our on track to graduate data. So there's pieces there in terms of credits that students are acquiring from the spring semester, and then we'll again have it again at the semester level. We're also, even though it's not currently a continued graduation requirement for this year's seniors, looking at our competency data. It's very important. And then lastly, connected to this particular strategy for mitigating unfinished learning, we've put in place, connected to unit internalization for all of our units, increased areas where teachers can look out for critical learning areas connected to standards that students should have had exposure to in the spring semester, which we knew there was an interruption in learning. So where are those teaching opportunities and learning opportunities within the unit? And then tied to an assessment question within the interim or end of unit assessment. So we can actually pull that data out of our interim measures and our unit measures, and that would be the last piece of data I'd say are right now what we're looking at to be most critical.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments from my board colleagues?
If ma'am, for a second, I think the second part is, you know, part of the progress. Thank you for sharing that, Tamara. I wanted it to kind of be out there in some sort of record so people can understand actually, you know, like what are we working towards every day to also help anybody who's listening, right, understand what we're trying to capture for the rest of this year, and also how we are trying to do school absent some of those things that we've all leaned on by way of state assessment, all of those things. And this is actually an incredible opportunity to learn in regards to how do we progress monitor student learning, not just in a remote way, but using new tools. I think the second part of my question too was, what are going to be the triggers for you? So, you know, this is Q1 or, you know, before the break, want to know where that line is, right? Where and by when, where do we need to make some adjustments? I think one of the things that we've seen from the progress monitoring here, certainly questions around capacity. The other things are, given what we're trying to learn in the outcomes, you know, like what is it that we can expect from you to understand about if shifts need to be made? And so, I mean, this might be obviously a big question, but it is a question of interest. You know, it's one thing for you to do the work and we can receive the data. It's another to figure out what do we need to adjust, right? And how can we all be a part of the conversation? So if that's something that's going to take you way too long to answer, that's okay. But it is a curiosity. And again, why we lean on progress monitoring so we can understand what it is that we need to fix and prepare for.
Yeah, no, I'll quickly say those adjustments and shifts. I appreciate you bringing up the question, those triggers along the way. I think I'll just give an example of that. That's inherent and set up in the system that you're referring to that leads up to this quarterly progress monitoring. So right before that, we had 3 focus on achievement sessions. and with Crisis Priority 3, with that focus on achievement session and with the work with you all, we had triggers that came and that were part of that. So an example would be, and then adjustments to the strategy along the way. And so, one of the pieces of data that you looked at, that we looked at the focus on achievement, but then also here are for this year's seniors, where they're at with the amount of no credits. And so also we talked about strategies for that. Vice President Bacon, you also gave a suggestion for a strategy for how are we leveraging our central office folks to help support in that strategy. Then our superintendent, through those sessions, also directed us to put together a strategy. So we're coupling that with that data from our focus on achievement session, and we actually are aligning our central office folks with our students that are in danger of not having the credits they need or need to make up credits from the spring semester, to ensure that we're acting. It's triggered something that we're acting on it right now to make sure that our students are on track to graduate. So that I just wanted to give you an example of that. That's one example of what I think are several triggers that we're adjusting based on the progress monitoring cycle that our superintendent and this board has put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So those answered my questions as well. Are there other questions from any of my other board colleagues at this time? I'd just like to thank you for this, well, everybody who's presented tonight, for this incredible work. I know that you work really hard on this and really think a lot about how can we always improve our instruction for our students. How can we best support our teachers with PD? I know we talked last time. I've seen some amazing teaching happening in remote learning from some of the classrooms I've had the privilege of being in. So I'm glad we're finding ways to capture all those and share with others. So since there's no other questions and we're a little behind time, I'll let the next person go. I'm not sure who's next up.
That will be me.
All right.
I'm going to talk really quickly about amplifying our student voice. Next slide, please. And so we wanted to start with where we are. Our teams have been reaching out to students through multiple strategies, broad approaches such as our surveys, which target all students in grades 3 through 12, as well as more narrow approaches, which focus on more in-depth storytelling through processes such as the In Our Shoes qualitative research, which includes deep dives in with 6 students conducting qualitative studies. So far this year, we've heard from over 7,000 students regarding their remote learning experience, their experiences with social emotional learning, suggestions that they have for curriculum changes, and perceptions of district policies. Next slide, please. And so, sorry, hold on one moment, I apologize. We've found lots of different ways to engage with students, and students have been very responsive and open to sharing their thoughts and experiences, but we know that there are many places where we can still improve. One of the most important things relates to the relationship between adults and students, as frequently we hear from our students that they see that adults don't recognize the perspectives that young people have, that adults don't share in or don't value, don't see it in the same light as they see other adult perspectives. And so we know that as we do that, we want to make sure that we are supporting our students so that we can listen and learn from the people who are doing it well, interacting with our students well. That we want to make sure that we are working on getting commitments from adults in our district to genuinely listen to what our students tell us and use that listening to actually take action. We want to make sure that adults in the district are actively making connections between what we hear from our students and our families to the work and the strategies that we're working on, so that we make the adjustments that actually will reflect what our young people tell us. I would love to just also put in a plug here. It's been really powerful to have the voices of young alumni also helping shape our strategies. These are young people who recently graduated from our schools, have experienced adult life, both in college and in work, and who have been able to share back with us what those experiences have been like, what they wish they had had, how they would like to be prepared for life past high school. And so it's been really powerful to interact with the EdNIM group of young DPS alumni. See if there are any questions on this.
Do any of my board colleagues have any questions on how we're supporting student voices? Just turn your camera on and unmute. Director Anderson?
Yeah, I just wanted to say more of a comment, just to say thank you guys for being imperative or including student voice in the conversation. As the youngest board member on the DPS board, I relate to a lot of the struggles that our students face, but also I understand where a lot of them are coming from. So just wanted to say I appreciate the work that's gone into including their voices.
Thank you.
Do we have any other? I would also echo, well, I'm waiting to see if anybody else has anything. I was also going to mention that as well as what Director Anderson said. I really appreciate that we're including the voice of the students. I don't want them to get lost in all of this and all that we're talking about. So I really appreciate that. In looking at the groups, does that also include elementary and middle and high? Like is it a large group of students from different age levels?
So the surveys include students from 3rd grade through 12th grade.
Okay.
In our shoes follow students at all ed levels. So we do get feedback. We tend to get more targeted feedback, I think, in actionable ways from our older students, who I think are able to both see and comment on their experiences, but also speak more to what they hope for out of their experiences in school.
Sure. Thank you. It doesn't look like there's any other. Oh, Director Cobian, sorry, I just saw you.
No worries. Thank you, President Olson. Superintendent Cordova, I have a question related to what we've learned from students in terms of the types of online learning that they're the most engaged by. I know that at the very beginning of our crisis priorities, we talked about treating virtual learning and the different modalities that schools are using, and even the different modalities that individual teachers within a building are using as an opportunity to identify what works best specifically for students. And I've heard Tamara talk a lot about how based on data, we're also identifying who those teachers are so that we can spread that learning to other teachers. I'm curious where student voice fits in here also in terms of engagement, because I've spoken to several students who have all told me that they prefer when they have, I think it's synchronous learning, where they have a live class as opposed to going and doing their work on their own throughout the week. Yeah, so I think that, like, there are other students who are helping their siblings, and so maybe that's not the best for them. But in terms of engagement, I just thought it was important to echo that I've heard that from several students, and wondering how that question related to virtual learning is being factored in.
Yeah, no, thank you. We definitely have been working with our students on getting feedback about what they like, what they don't like about virtual learning, and trying to use that to help shape improvements, both in training for our teachers and in experiences for our students. I think the feedback around synchronous learning and why students value it so much is, I think they really are seeking, particularly in this time where they are so distanced from their peers, they're really seeking opportunities for true connection. And so being able to create the kind of environment where students really can connect with each other and with their teachers is really powerful. And the teachers who are doing this the best, I think, really are creating regular routines, ongoing and intentional social emotional learning. So a space for students to be able to both learn strategies, but also talk about what their experiences have been like. And then truly, rigorous and motivational learning experiences. I think it's really telling how much our students really want to be in school, and anything that we can do to create the virtual space feel more like an in-person space really does help our kids.
All right. I don't think that I see anybody else with any questions. Thank you for those answers. Do we have another portion, or are we next steps? There we go.
Great. So am I on mute? Sorry. I'm
No,
on
we
mute.
can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have my camera on. So, so here are the asks that we would have of the board. In the exact same way, we started off this session by talking about the power of the crisis priorities and the focus that they give us. We would ask you to help us stay focused on moving this important work forward. That's both in asking for data around the progress that we are making, but it's also in pushing hard questions, particularly around capacity. I know Vice President Bacon referenced that we're yellow on capacity across all of the different crisis priorities, and really pushing to have the hard conversations about what is it that we need to stop doing to enable true implementation of the most important aspects of these crisis priorities feels really important. And then our commitment is to make sure that we keep you updated on our progress. We will continue to monitor in all of these areas, to shift and adjust as we get feedback, so that we can make sure that we're addressing the areas of concern.
Great. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions on the final portion here? Just unmute, turn off your camera. I don't think I see anybody. Oh, Director Anderson, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just wanted to ensure for our listening audience and for those who are, thinking about the future of DPS, that Superintendent Cordova, you're taking your services to somewhere else soon, and just wanted to really figure out how we can reassure with this, like the next steps of there is continuity, even though that there will be some changes happening in Denver Public Schools, that this work is, it's being held by our entire board, it's being held by our senior leadership. So would just love to point that to you and President Olson about just reassuring our constituents that there is still continuity, even though we're going through a different leadership change soon, but we just want families to hear that from our leadership as they have watched this presentation.
No, absolutely. I think that really is spot on. The goals really are enduring. The focus on crisis priorities will absolutely keep our team on the same page. And throughout this period of transition, I believe it will be essential for our teams to be able to have the guidance from this board. We are, in fact, engaged in the right work.
I would echo the same thing. I'd just like to reassure everybody that the crisis priorities will continue. And we are thinking of our students first, as we mentioned on Friday. The way students experience Denver Public Schools will not change. During this time, the incredible teachers and staff and leaders who care for them and educate them are going to stay in the front of our minds as we work through this next transition. But the crisis priorities are strong, and as we've seen from the presentation tonight, we've got some great plans, and even know where it's not working, we know what the questions are to be able to find the answers. So any other questions or comments? All right, so we'd like to thank everybody for attending our virtual work session this evening. It is now time for the board to move into executive session for the purposes of a discussion regarding the purchase, acquisition, lease, sale, or transfer of any real, personal or other property interest is authorized by CRS 24-6-4024A, and for the purpose of discussions regarding personnel matters is authorized by CRS 24-6-4024F. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
So moved.
Oh,
Great. Better, more the merrier. May I have a second?
One of us will be the first, one of us will be the second.
Perfect. So Robin, do you, or Lori, whoever's taking the names, you're good? Got it? All right, great. Thank you. Miss Atwood, please call roll.
Director Anderson,
aye.
Director Bacon,
Aye.
Director Balderman,
Aye.
Director Kobian,
Aye.
Reverend Lorvik,
Aye.
Dr. O'Brien, Dr. O'Brien. Let me go to Dr. Olson and then we'll come back to Dr. O'Brien.
Perfect.
Okay. Dr. Olson?
Aye.
Okay.
Well, we have a majority nonetheless. She might be having trouble with her
Yeah.
technology, as we all know how that goes. It is now time for us to move to our executive Zoom room. Board members, you have received a separate link for this purpose. This concludes the public portion of our meeting. Thank you.
That was the DPS Board of Education work session tonight. You got to hear some of that. We'll definitely go back and listen to the rest of that. But definitely, this is not the time to not be paying attention, folks. This is definitely a time to be paying attention to what is going on in your school district, because it directly impacts our kids. We've got some majority of people who want to do great things for our kids, and we need them to want to do those great things with us. And so I think it's very important that we're paying attention, very important that we are alert to what's happening in our schools, and that we're working with our schools. I mean, one of the things that I am fortunate to be able to do is to work with schools on a daily basis, work with principals and assistant principals and teachers and directly with parents and students on a daily basis. And it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of things that do need to get done. And most schools will tell you we're not anywhere close to where we want to be. We're not anywhere close to the vision that we have, but we got to keep pressing hard. And so I appreciated some of that tonight in the work session that I heard about progress monitoring and looking at making sure that the families are provided the resources that they need for students to be successful. And the thing about progress monitoring, you got to pay attention. As those of you who watched the earlier part of the conversation that Kevin Patterson and I had, you've got to pay attention to what the data is telling you, not simply the data point, but what is the data point telling you? Like, we can progress monitor. When you look at progress and you say, okay, if the goal by this time this kid should have been at 60 and they're at 48, you need to then unpack 48, right? What are all the things that contributed to you not being at 60 and you are at 48, right? And you need to be willing to go back and look at everything that has contributed to, or everything that might have gotten in the way to keep you away from the progress you want to achieve. And so that's the big thing. It's not just about progress monitoring. It's about purposeful investment, right? It's about pedagogy that is innovative and individualized to meet the needs of students. Similar to what Kevin and I were talking about earlier on this video about healthcare, meeting your patient at their individual point of need, right? And then based on best practices, based on best available tools, providing the care that individual needs. And so that's the same thing we have to do in education. And we believe that we can get it done as a healthy collective. So thank you for listening in. Thank you for joining us again. To our guest here tonight, CEO of Connect for Health Colorado, Kevin Patterson, and then those of you who hung out with us tonight to see the bit of the board work session. So again, you can learn more about FaithBridge at www.faithbridgeco.org. That's www.faithbridgeco.org. And you can reach out to us at info@faithbridgeco.org if you would like to join us on one of our Monday night FaithBridge focus shows. All right, take care. Have a great evening. Remember, stay focused.